Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of OP Radio. I hope you're having as fantastic a Wednesday as I am. We have another great show lined up for you today with some very special guests. First off, I want to allow the notorious Kelvin Fichter to say hello. Good morning, Kelvin. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. It's a good day. It's a Thursday. Is it a Thursday?
Oh my gosh, it is.
I
think it's You're right. It is Thursday. Wow, I'm lost in the sauce. I don't even know what day it is. We normally have these on Wednesday, but today's kind of special. We're having it a day late. Promise you it'll be worth it, though. So before we start off, Kelvin's going to be leading the majority of this conversation, but I want to let our other guests say hello and introduce themselves. So why don't we start with Javed?
Hello. Hi, everyone. This is Javed. Been into Bitcoin since a long time. Worked with Optimism in the past. Now working with Celestia, trying to bridge and integrate OP Stack with Celestia. That's me.
Awesome. And then we also have Jacob on the call with us today. Good morning, Jacob.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having us. So Jacob Arlek with Celestia Labs has strategy, supporting, working with folks who are trying to build this kind of stuff, like we'll be talking about on this radio.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So we just dropped a blog post on this topic on blog.oplabs.co. So feel free to check that out. And it's on this concept of OP Stack mod. And I would love to set this up and to introduce this. I would love Kelvin to just introduce us to this concept and explain what an OP Stack mod is.
Cool. Yeah. So obviously the OP Stack is a very powerful software stack. Makes it pretty easy to spin up your own roll up. And one of the key things of the stack is that it's free and open source, MIT license. You can do whatever you want with it. And obviously people are doing whatever they want with it. And that's kind of the point. That's what we want people to do. And as the stack is kind of coming into maturity, people are starting to build sort of more and more production quality, essentially modifications to the stack. And a lot of the times it's hard for OP Labs to do a ton of review on everything itself. I mean, OP Labs is heads down on a lot of the decentralization work around Optimism as a whole. And we kind of didn't want that to limit the ability for other people to work on these modifications, because a lot of them are really cool. A lot of them are really interesting. And we think that some of them potentially can be included in the stack down the line. But people need feedback, right? People need actionable feedback. They need eyes on something. If you don't have people testing the thing out and trying figuring out where things are working and where things aren't working, it's hard to turn something into a production thing. So we basically wanted to sort of introduce this concept of the OP Stack mod, which is basically just modifications that people make to the OP Stack that we wanted to highlight and get people to play with and get feedback on, so that people can improve those modifications. And then maybe one day, if the modification provides fills a clear need in the stack, it could be included in the stack. So that's the high level concept behind mods. They're kind of like just highlighted hacks and modifications that people have done from teams and individuals who are looking for feedback to turn this into something really production quality.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Kelvin. And I also want to ask you, Kelvin, I want to start broad here, and we're going to get into more detail with some of the team members from Celestia here. But I want to ask you about this concept of data availability and consensus, what those things are and why they're important.
Sure, yeah. So if you don't know, blockchains are state machines. State machines basically take a state and they take some input and they kind of transform that into a new state. So traditionally, when we think of those inputs, we're thinking about transactions and blocks. And so the two very important properties when it comes to these transactions and blocks, the first one is ordering, right? I think we kind of understand that concept. Kind of the classic double spend problem is all about ordering. If I have one ETH and I try to send that one ETH to two people at the same time in two different transactions, depending on the ordering of those transactions, one of them is going to be included and the other one isn't, right? And so the ordering of these inputs is very, very important. And then the other thing is data availability, and that's just practically having access to those inputs, right? I mean, we live in the real world. These transactions are bits and bytes that live on different machines. If these things weren't kept around in a way that we could access them, then we don't even know what the inputs are, and we couldn't recompute the system. We couldn't rerun the chain. So we have these two very important properties, ordering and data availability. And I guess in a second, maybe Celestia will talk about some of the work that they've done to sort of separate these two concepts in the stack, because traditionally they've been very tied to one another, right? Most of the major rollups today use Ethereum for both ordering and data availability, but obviously Ethereum is quite expensive. And so there are situations in which, depending on the security properties that a specific chain wants, it might be the case that they don't want to use Ethereum for data availability, because it is so expensive, and they're willing to take the security risk of doing that. But sort of the key observation is that we can still use Ethereum for ordering, even if we're not using it for data availability.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's exactly the segue I was going for. I think next we'll have Javed explain the news that Celestia released today, explain what Celestia is doing. And by the way, Kelvin, I'll just kind of pass the baton to you. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to lean on your expertise to sort of guide this conversation. So yeah, Javed, do you want to give us an overview of what Celestia is doing with OP Stack mod?
Yeah, like Kelvin was mentioning, it is possible with OP Stack to, like, for example, use a different chain for data availability. And that is what precisely we have been working on in integrating OP Stack with Celestia. So today it is possible to use our integration of OP Stack and Celestia to use Celestia as a data availability layer for OP Stack. And the way it practically works is that the OP Stack has been modified to write data that it was previously writing to Ethereum and write that data to now Celestia. So the integration basically allows a new level of modularity in the OP Stack, in that you can use a different chain like Celestia for data availability while still retaining Ethereum for settlement. Yeah, and this is the integration that I've been working on. And yeah, I'd like to expand on the next steps here, which is basically allowing a data availability interface, which is more generic. And just how I've been working on integrating Celestia, it is now possible to have like a generic interface where anybody can implement a data availability chain interface, and it can be used to write data to any chain, including, for example, Bitcoin. So yeah, this is what we've been working on to make it more modular in terms of how data availability works in the OP stack. Yeah, I'd like to pause here for any questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that really quickly. I think the cool thing about this mod and kind of the key reason why we're highlighting it is that it's not tied to any specific data availability layer. It's proposing an interface that can take an OP stack chain and essentially allow it to select which data availability layer works best for its particular needs. And obviously for chains like OP mainnet, Ethereum is still the data availability layer that we need, but there's always people who, and always applications that have very different security assumptions, very different needs. And really the cool thing about this is that people can start to experiment with alternative data availability layers that better fit those needs.
Yeah, I think too, to build on that, kind of like the backstory of how this sort of all came together too, is like we've been talking to developers who were wanting to build OP Stack rollups. They basically sort of like were interested in exploring using Celestia or other data layers, for their use case. Maybe it's a game or something like that, where they just really want to have a lot more, throughput on chain and stuff. And basically, when we started talking, started exploring it, started sort of scoping it out and stuff, we had some conversation with the OP team, et cetera. And one of the ideas that we sort of was thrown around was the idea of like, why not also just do this as a, with a modular DM interface where you can swap in other chains and whatnot. And we initially, I think, like on our side, we were kind of surprised by the desire to do that. So we were sort of like, oh, like, well, that's a core part of definitely the modular vision, et cetera. But, didn't really, that wasn't like our maybe initial thought. We were like very much thinking about developers who just wanted to use other DA, Celestia for DA. But then we sort of started, pretty quickly realized that this is like could be one of the most powerful ways to demonstrate and sort of like, commit to take a leap of faith, like sort of towards the broader modular vision. So basically, we basically started working on this. We're working on it for a number of months. I think Java can maybe speak to how this works, but we've done some demos, even putting OP Stack on Bitcoin. I think there's some in our repo that you can check out. And basically, we just, in general, it's like you basically use any chain or backend you want. You can use Ethereum, Bitcoin, Celestia, whatever in various forms, support before when it comes out properly, et cetera. And you can even use S3. So I've talked to some people who jokingly have been like, hey, I want to launch my thing. I want to, keep the existing sort of configuration for basically almost as close as possible to the existing configuration for OP Stack on selling on Ethereum, et cetera. But I also like maybe I just want to have like really, really cheap DA initially and just like play around with that. See for things that like don't need a lot of censorship or something like that. And so the other thing too I wanted to mention is that a lot of this whole sort of discussion around using other chains for different purposes or in the stack, it basically sort of like really just all comes from this broader sort of vision that I think we are really committed to Celestia, which is just basically that chains don't really actually need to compete, right? Like they can also be cooperative, and developers can like basically mix and match the various like use different chains as Kelvin was saying to best serve their use case. So all this also reminds me of the 2018 2019 era. So back then, like people would like love to talk about governance and on-chain versus off-chain governance and all this kind of stuff, social consensus on chains, and a lot of this like emerging conversation that we're seeing around what constitutes a real roll-up, like is sovereignty a real thing, are roll-ups real, all this kind of stuff. It all kind of like harkens back to that era. But in that era, it was like everything was very PvP. It was like my chain is better governed than your chain because reasons, or this design feature or whatever. And what's cool is that the paradigm shift here is that moving towards this modular architecture lets us move away from that entire mode of thinking and towards something where it's like just fundamentally cooperative and collaborative, and you can actually define an even lower level. Like maybe I want one part of the stack to be governed in a certain different way than another part of the stack, right? Bridging is like obviously a clear example of where that's already kind of how people think about it, right? And so that's kind of a lot of the context that's sort of driven a lot of our excitement around making this happen. And we're definitely going to be exploring any opportunities we have to sort of bring that to the space more broadly.
Yeah, just to reiterate, the through line, it sounds like to me, is really cooperation over competition, which anybody who's familiar with Optimism and the OP stack, this is a recurring theme, and this is just yet another example of that ethos in action. And this modularism over maximalism, I think, is the through line here.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So I think we're going to keep this one pretty short and sweet. Celestia has put out their own announcement on this. I pinned the tweet to the space here. You can also check it out. They put out a blog post. You can find that from their Twitter profile. It's at celestia.org. OP Labs PBC also put out a blog post on this. So I'd encourage everybody to go check this out for more details on this announcement. Before we sort of wrap things up and wind it down, is there anything anybody else would like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to just say briefly, one of the key things with trying to highlight these things is to get people to give feedback on them. And, I think the idea of a modular data availability interface in the stack is really powerful. And we want to make sure that this really does work for kind of any data availability layer that, or any reasonable data availability layer that we can dream of. And so I think like the two things that I'd really like to see people give feedback on here are, of course, one, if you read the blog post, I think both blog posts, you'll see links to some of the docs that Celestia have created, and just kind of stress testing it and just seeing that there's essentially a link between the data availability layer and the consensus and ordering layer on Ethereum. And so, making sure that link is strong, and that if you're spamming the data availability layer, that you're not going to see any problems. That's one thing that's really useful to try out. And then the other thing is to try out alternative data availability layers entirely and plug them into this interface and see if they work, and highlight points where maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it needs to be made a little more generic to support certain things that are currently not being supported, and like really have fun with that. The Amazon, like the S3 example, is not crazy. I mean, the point of data availability is that you're kind of just hosting it wherever you want, and you're storing pointers to where the thing is hosted on Ethereum. So, mess around, like try different things, try the S3 thing, try making a data availability committee that plugs into this interface, try publishing stuff to Bitcoin, and find the ways where either the interface is already great and it supports all these things, or maybe there's situations where we want to make it a little more generic. So give it a shot, mess around with it, and that's the sort of feedback that we need to take this from a mod to maybe eventually a full-blown part of the stack.
That's right. Iterate, experiment, and improve. Jacob and Javed, any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that, developers should read our blog post. We are going pretty deep into the details of how the interface is implemented. Like Kelvin said, we are trying to make it really generic. And I've already tried to implement a Bitcoin implementation of the same interface. So it's already quite generic. But if developers have feedback on how to make it even better, then that's better for everyone. I'd like to close with asking developers for feedback on the interface. So, yep.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say is the folks at Caldera, they are releasing the Taro testnet on top of this. It's not using, I think it's going to be adapted to the interface soon, but basically it integrates Celestia, lets you try out deploying your own, you can deploy a smart contract or anything like that too, or, try out games, like whatever, this sort of use cases this serves. You can try out their testnet. They'll put that out, I think, pretty soon. And we have our docs as well up on our site, and you can easily deploy your own OP stack rollup with Celestia.
Yeah, and once again, the best entry point I think into these topics is going to be at blog.oplabs.co, as well as the post put out by Celestia at blog.celestia.org. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Jacob and Javed and the whole team at Celestia, and thank you, Kelvin, for leading this conversation. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.